How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I'm Susan.
I just got done watching those videos that they suggested on that sheet,
Oh,
that
did ya?
you
Yeah,
were doing them. Yeah.
yeah.
So now if I could just retain it.
Well, how'd you feel about the videos?
I thought they were good. They're very helpful, I think.
Good. Good. That's great. Hi, Susan.
Hi, which videos?
So they're just on this little sheet.
Yeah.
So I had put together some videos for Chirpwood for the Paint by Shadows initially. And if you go to their website, you can access the little videos. And they're just little skills, how to thin the paint, how to make it darker, how to make it lighter, mixing two colors to make a third, and then wet on wet versus wet on dry. They're kind of like beginner skills. So, like, just getting started, I'm just curious from each of you as you opened up your kit, like, what were your kind of initial thoughts about everything in there, or,
Well, I was pleased at the variety of colors. I mean, they have a decent selection of paints, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I just opened the brushes, and they seem okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. How about
I
you,
was
Carol?
a little
Go ahead.
surprised at the size of the largest canvas. I mean, I thought, oh, all right.
Do you feel like bigger than you thought?
I think I'm going to start with one of the middle-sized ones.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. Did you think, like, were you surprised at how big it was, or did you think it'd be bigger?
Yeah, I was surprised at how large it was. Yeah.
Okay, because I'll show you these two. Some other ones, they also have these Masters ones that are 18 by 24.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and you can buy one of these as a kit, or you can get the one that you guys have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was thinking I thought one of the smaller ones would be great to start with too. Which one did you pull, Susan?
Well, I was looking at the medium ones.
One of the medium ones, not one of the little itty bitty guys. But which one are you thinking? So I thought it'd be fun if we all kind of work on the same one. This one?
Yeah.
Okay, now, which one is that? I guess that's this one. Yeah.
Yeah, this one. Which, so then you've got your little guide. So the artist.
Where's that guide? I don't have that guide.
Do you not have one of these in there?
Oh, that I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I thought no. Oh, it's on the back side. Okay.
It's on the back side. Yep. So, kind of a couple things just to kind of think about with these kits. Their kind of goal with the kit in mind was kind of everything that Paint by Numbers is, but then everything that it isn't as well. They want it to be sort of this idea of Paint by Shadows is something that a beginner could feel comfortable with, where they could use this guide and mix colors that are similar and make it similar, or you could sort of go off on your own and change it and make it your own. So it's not that you have to stick with this guide. If you want colors to be different, you want it to be, expressed in a different way, that's kind of the beauty, the creative freedom that you have. Although you could make it look like this if you wanted. So I'm going to start mine pretty similar to this in how I would get started with completing something like this one here. But then as we get going, it's like, feel free to do your own thing too. Absolutely. And I'm just going to switch my camera. Here we go. Cool. So, and one thing I found was kind of helpful, I mean, you don't have to do this. I have this just like wooden surface. I just take some masking tape, and I found it was kind of helpful to make like little tape bubbles on the back. with some masking tape, and I just kind of tape it down so it doesn't move around on me. But I mean, you don't have to do this step. This is just something I thought was kind of helpful when I've done them in the past.
I think that's smart.
Yeah. And the nice thing too is like the masking tape and the canvas, it's like you're not going to hurt the canvas. So I like that about it. And just like one in each corner, one in the middle. Looks good. Now I found, so obviously in our classes, we've talked about putting washes over things. I have done paintings, the paint by shadows, where I have washed it with a thin layer of acrylic, and I have done one where I have not washed it. And I think the choice is yours. It does, because there is a grayscale image printed on this, technically you are working on a middle value already. But what it doesn't have is the coat of acrylic that you'll get with a wash. So it's really up to you. I have found it does work just fine just beginning to paint. And then, we've got our brushes. So when I look at this image, I just try to initially kind of work dark to light. And I've talked a little bit before about how that doesn't mean you have to only stick, okay, black has to come first, then this dark blue, then this dark red. It's just generally speaking dark to light. Because acrylic paint, of course, is very layerable. We can build it up. So what I am going to start doing is just picking a point to start in. So for example, you know, maybe I want to mix this kind of darkish magenta color, and I could start to kind of block some of that in. Or perhaps maybe I want to mix some of this kind of darker color within the leaves, kind of this blue-green. I could start to kind of block that in. So that's kind of how I begin, is I mix some of the darker colors that I see here, and I'll begin by blocking those in. And as far as mixing colors goes, is of course, you can try to be as close as you want, or you can make things your own. And then as far as getting some of these darker colors, I think of like, you know, maybe look at your crimson red with your scarlet. And then you could always try a touch of like olive green or the viridian green to slightly darken this. You could also try a touch of black to darken a little bit. So that's kind of where I begin. Oftentimes when I'm mixing, I don't necessarily have a prescribed recipe. I just kind of pick a starting point and then kind of start mixing it until I get something that I like.
Can I ask you to repeat those again?
Yes, absolutely. So I have some scarlet. This is scarlet.
Oh, okay.
And then I have some of the crimson red.
Okay.
And so I'm going to start by putting some of those on this piece of palette paper I've got here. And I'm just going to kind of make myself up a little palette. Because when I'm kind of hopping around between colors, I don't necessarily, I kind of mix it as I go. Because when you look in at this flower, there's lots of different layers of colors going on here. And of course, we don't have to make it identical either. We can change it. And then I have some of the olive green, and I have some of the viridian green. And my guess is I'll probably end up putting some of the sap and the emerald green on there too, really, because we got lots of greens going on here.
Did you say viridian?
Yep, the viridian green.
And olive green.
Yes. So I'm kind of starting there, and you know, I'm going to go ahead and put a little black on my palette too, because there is a little bit right in the middle, and I may actually want just a little touch for some of these darker reds, magentas.
What's that noise?
I'm not sure. It may be. I know it may work. I don't know. Do you guys want to try putting yourselves on mute unless you have a question? That might be, maybe we won't pick up background noise that way, but feel free to pop on anytime you have something to say or have a question. Sometimes I think it's like the, I don't know, just sound from the computers. So I'm going to go ahead and just start to mix some of this darker magenta color. And I'm going to start with this crimson red. Actually, that looks pretty darn close as is. And I'm just going to put a touch of the olive green into that. Just like the teensiest, tiniest touch. And you can, if you feel like you didn't get enough in there, you can always pull just teensy tiny bits at a time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, I've got my bigger flat brush here, but honestly use whichever brush you feel like you like the best. And I'll probably switch around with these different brushes to get different strokes. But I'm going to start kind of blocking in some of these larger areas that I see this kind of magenta color. And I'm not going to worry about it being super duper perfect and fitting like within each little edge, because again, acrylic paint, we want it to layer. And it's okay if mine doesn't look identical to this image either. This is kind of, it's my starting point. You know, mine's going to have my own kind of personal touch into it too. Now, if you want this a little bit brighter, you could actually put like a little touch of white into it too. But sometimes with this initial coat, I don't mind that it's kind of dark. In fact, mine looks darker on the video than it does in real life. So I actually may put just a touch of white in here. And the white actually just, it helps with the opacity too. Just a little bit of white to lighten that. I don't want it to be like super pastel-y, so I'm just bringing a little bit of white in at a time. And actually, if you feel like it's too kind of dull, if you put a touch of this other red, this scarlet red, that'll help kind of bring some of that life back into it a little bit. Some of that brightness back. There you go. So I'm just going to start by kind of hopping around to these different points where I see some of this kind of color. And I'm just going to kind of start by blocking that in. And I kind of use the shadows to just kind of look at the direction of the brush stroke. That's why I think they're kind of handy. But again, you can change things. That's the beauty of acrylic paint that we're going to start layering here. Like, don't feel like you have to have it look exactly like this image. If you want to bring a little bit more of the pinky into it too, a little bit of this, you could try a little bit of your lemon yellow. And you'll want some of that on your palette anyway for some of this other stuff eventually. But lemon yellow can sometimes help kind of brighten and bring some of the pinkiness back too. So play around with mixing colors. And sometimes I like to have slight variations of similar colors and kind of I let them overlap a little bit. I think that can look kind of cool. So it's not all one exact color. So yeah, I'm just kind of hopping around all these different little points that I'm seeing this kind of magenta-ish color and just kind of popping it in where I see it. I might switch to some different brushes, get some different size, bring a little bit more of this yellow into here. Yeah, I just, you know, when I'm mixing colors, it's kind of this constant, like, it's constantly like evolving on my palette, you know. Let's see. And you know, if there's ever a point too where you're like, I just don't want to look at the reference at all, like you don't have to look at it either. That's kind of the beauty of how this kit is designed. It's like you can use it as much as you need or totally get rid of it. And sometimes, you know, in my initial layer, I like my color to be maybe a little darker, a little bit more bold, and then I'll kind of bring some lighter color on top of that, so that can be kind of fun too. You can always bring a little bit of, mix a little purple up too, and bring some kind of purple into that too if you want more of that magenta. So just kind of little tips for colors, you know. Again, I'm not super particular. I don't care if mine's like exactly like what I see here, but if you're wanting yours to be more like a certain color or something, don't hesitate to ask how to get a certain color. But at this point, I'm just kind of popping in. All right, let's see. I'm pretty close here with this one. A little other spots. And then I'm just gonna kind of repeat that process with like the next color that I wanna work with. You know, maybe it might be kind of handy while I've got some black here, just to kind of tap a little bit of black into kind of the middle here. You'll notice there's some kind of light lines in there. You could use a little white to kind of get a little bit of a gray, to kind of bring that in there. That can be kind of helpful. And too, like, you know, as I mentioned, feel free to change any colors. If there's something you'd rather have it be a different color, make it a different color. And after we get kind of the initial block in, I think then that's a great time to then add kind of bits of expression, you know, of things you want to do. There's a little bit more gray kind of within here too. I'm just gonna kind of pop that in a minute while I'm working in the middle. Just taking some white, bringing some black into it to make a gray. Kind of a darker gray. I'm just gonna kind of pop that in. And sometimes, you know, I'll just kind of tap my brush a little bit, kind of tap it in. Rather, it's like, you know, sometimes you think of brush strokes as you're always stroking, but sometimes it's like you're tapping, or, you know, you can even bring a little bit of blue into that gray if you want to. A little bit of blue can be nice. Yeah, if there's a color or something you don't like, remember acrylic paint is so layerable. You can cover it up if there's an area that you feel like you're not looking, like you don't like the look of it. But remember, we're still at a really early stage here. Okay, so I am going to just kind of pick up the pace a little bit more and do a little bit less talking, a little bit more painting. But before I do that, I'm just gonna explain what I'm gonna do in a minute. So I'm gonna just kind of work in the flower here primarily at this point. And I am going to just look at some of these just different color variations that I'm seeing, and I'm gonna kind of pop them in. Now, to get some of these colors, you know, starting with white as your base could be nice. And then even starting to bring in some of that initial color you made, a little bit of yellow, some more of the red. I just kind of go between those colors to get all these different variations that I see here. There's lots of different colors and things happening. Seeing a little bit more white. So you probably need quite a bit of white for this part as you're mixing all these different tints of these colors here. And just remember too, some of the techniques of wet paint on wet paint is going to be blended. So that's kind of why I like hopping around, because some of this paint appears like it sits more on top. So by kind of mixing and painting this way, it allows areas to dry. So when we come back over top, we can get that sort of layered effect. A bit more yellow. And like if, you know, if the color needs to look a little bit more orangey, add a little bit more yellow to it. If it needs to look a little bit more pink, add a little bit more white to it. You know, I just kind of, like I said, there's no specific prescribed recipe. I'm just kind of mixing and going back and forth with all these colors I have on my palette. And I'm not really adding a whole bunch of new ones. And by doing that, that's gonna make this look nice and unified, even if my colors aren't like identical to what's, you know, here, which is totally fine in my opinion. In fact, I kind of like it being my own thing. You know, it's like this reference can be our starting point, really. Just kind of hopping around, and don't worry about, you know, it can be kind of loose and expressive at this point, and maybe try mixing paint directly on the canvas a little bit too, you know, layer some wet paint over wet paint, or a couple colors that are close over top of each other can be kind of interesting. So I just like to try a whole bunch of different kind of variations, techniques. And then every once in a while, remember to step back too. Because remember, you're so close to this. So sometimes you just need to step back. All right. A little bit more yellow. And if you use a little bit more of that scarlet red with the yellow, you'll get a little bit more of the kind of brighter pink. And two, you know, sometimes we just need a couple layers to build things up. Like I said, you can try mixing some colors directly on the canvas. I think that can be kind of fun and interesting. And you remember when you're painting something from nature too, it's not perfect. When something is not perfect, it allows us to have room to express ourselves, make it our own. And some of these little kind of itty bitty lines and things, I add those in later. To me, that's coming in after we get a lot of this kind of foundation put in. Then I kind of worry about all those little itty bitty things that we see. So if you've been thinking about them, well, we'll get to them. I find that, you know, it's a pretty relaxing kind of process to paint this way. It's more white. And you know, I'm kind of still working in the flower at any point. If you're like, you know, I'd love to just go work down in the leaves or something, feel free to do that too. It's like you can hop around and let areas up here dry and then come back to them. Sometimes that's nice to do because you want things to dry so they're not all blending together. As this painting very much looks like things are sort of sitting on top. It's being layered and sort of built up. And again, I'm not really prescribing to any particular recipe with mixing. I'm just kind of mixing as I go on my palette and placing these colors where I see them. Going back and forth a little bit, generally working dark to light, but not always exactly. If there's a spot you don't like, just let it dry and then paint right over top of it. Yellow. You know, cleaning your brush off in between, you know, colors can be helpful, but then sometimes I don't clean my brush off in between colors because a little bit of the, you know, other color would look nice all mixed in. That's what I kind of did with this yellow. I didn't really clean my brush too much. I just kind of let some of the pinks kind of pick up from it so they can kind of mix in a little bit. And to me, it just kind of creates unity. But there's other times where I was like, no, I'd really need a clean brush because the color wouldn't mix well or something. And if you found you accidentally painted something the wrong color or, you know, you don't like it, like I said, no worries. Let it dry, paint right over top of it. Layering is good. And sometimes when you accidentally do something, it ends up looking really cool in the end. All right, I am going to start kind of blocking in a little bit of the leaves now. So I'm just cleaning off the bigger of the round brushes. And I was kind of looking at some of this darker color, and I've got actually a lot of colors that I can probably just use here on my palette. I think that Viridian green is kind of nice. I'm going to put a touch of the ultramarine blue in with it. Maybe a touch of the other green and just kind of mix that all together. Actually, maybe a touch of black too. So just kind of making a darkish bluish green color. This is more green than blue, but I could glaze some blue over top, which is just a wash of blue over top of this when it dries. That might look kind of cool. I'm just kind of moving my brush in different ways. Kind of moving it around back and forth, tapping a little bit, trying to kind of emulate some of that texture. A little bit more blue into it. And keep in mind, if you feel like it's not super thick or super opaque with that first layer, that's okay. You can always layer it up again. And then anywhere where there's this kind of darkish color, this kind of blue-green color, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of pop it in everywhere that I see it. All right, then I'm gonna look at some of these other kind of darker greens. They're kind of set back a little bit. Now to kind of make a deeper green, you could put a touch of red into your green or a little touch of black just to kind of neutralize it a little bit. You can always mix a little bit of white into if you need that opacity to come up a little bit. Just a little bit of white. And I'm just gonna kind of pop that green into some of these different spots here. And again, I don't care if my greens are exact, but the idea is the same. I'm just gonna kind of start layering and building that color. And then occasionally, maybe I add more white to it, maybe more red to it. just to get some of these subtle variations that we see. Because if you look at all these greens, just lots of variations. It's not just one. And so that's kind of how, you know, I'm going to just show you my palette a minute too, so you can kind of see. It's like I just make these different piles, keep adding to it, taking from other piles. And for me, I can't, you know, I think that works pretty well. But just, you know, I think it's a fun time to try experimenting with your mixing too, and just trying different things out. You know, if I want to brighten some of these up now on this kind of next layer, that's going to help some of these first initial values go back, and my next layer is going to pop forward. All these kind of different greens. And again, don't worry if you accidentally get some of the color where, you know, it's not supposed to be exactly, because sometimes that looks nice when you then put the next color on top. It gives more of that sense of blending or layering that this painting has. And again, sometimes we see multiple colors. So it's like maybe you have to take a couple colors and sort of layer it to get the effect that you see. You know, it's like some of the texture stuff, it's like you get to decide how might you interpret that. Is it sort of tapping your brush? Is it long brush strokes? Is it taking a dry brush over top of wet paint and sort of softening it? You know, there's lots of different kind of skills and techniques to kind of explore here. And some of it, it's just like what you think looks good. And that's the beauty too, is something, you know, as expressive as this flower is. It's like so many possibilities. I am going to pull out some of my other greens here, the sap green and the emerald green, just to get some of the brightness down here that we're seeing. Some of these other colors. And then actually some of the cerulean blue will look nice for some of the brighter parts, and then also up in here too, and then within the flower itself. And maybe even a little bit of the cobalt blue. It's like, you know, we do have a lot of color choices, and I think it's kind of fun to use what we have here to kind of create some of these different brightnesses and the different effects. But you can also give yourself a limited color palette and just work with like primaries and black and white and try to mix everything yourself too. But like I said, I kind of put things on my palette and just kind of take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know, it's like, it's almost like cooking with like a loose guideline. You know, you've got this kind of starting point, but then you've got all this sort of creative freedom to mix colors and change things. And actually, I probably put more white on here too. Again, sometimes white, I just like to use a little bit of that to, like I said, thicken my paint, make it more opaque. And then for some of these greens, it's just going to help me get like the specific green I'm looking for. Like sometimes you need just a little bit of white with it, like straight from the tube's not exactly what you want. And again, I'm just using that larger of the two round brushes. And you know, it's like if you accidentally cover up a part of a shadow, just don't worry about that too much. It's like the shadows are really there to get you started and get you going. And, you know, you see all these kind of thin lines in this one, and a lot of that is going to happen at the end too. And I remember when I started painting, I would always want to paint little details first. Like you draw a cat and it's like right away you want to draw the whiskers or something like that, you know, and it took me a while to realize, okay, let's approach this differently and start kind of looser and broader, and then we finish with all those fine details. Good. I think this is a fun process too to just watch come together. It's definitely given me, this process of painting this way has given me ideas for my own paintings too. Just with process and applying. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can take and use again and again and again. See, I need a little bit more lemon yellow. A little bit of lemon yellow is going to give you some of that yellowy green that we're kind of seeing in some of these green colors. So just mixing a little bit of yellow in there will help push that. I'm just using the lemon yellow. It's nice and cool. Looks good with this green. And yep, sometimes just add a little bit more yellow, sometimes a little bit more of the green, a little bit more blue. Just kind of hop around and just kind of look at the different areas, look at the shapes that you're seeing made by the different colors. You know, it may not be like exactly a circle or a triangle, but an organic type shape that the shape of the color is making up. So I try to look at the shapes and too, and that's why the shadows are helpful to get you started. And you know, sometimes I'll put pops of color where maybe it's not in this image and because I want to make it my own. A little bit more red. Right. Let's see, a couple more light green spots, and then I'm gotta get some of this blue in here. There we go. Mostly white. Let's see. A bit more green over on this side, and then I'm gonna bring some of the blue into it. And then some of that yellow that we're seeing. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush off and start to bring just a little bit of the blue we're seeing into the leaves. And of course, we got that background too. Think about. And you know, I will say I found that too, this painting certainly doesn't need to be finished in one session. I found, you know, sometimes I'll kind of block in, take a break, and then come back and kind of add some of those little details. So too, we can, you know, even keep that in mind. Don't feel like you need to rush by any means. This is definitely a go at your own pace project. But I find that once you kind of get the block in done, or you've done one of these, they tend to, your speed will increase a little bit, I think. And again, I'm just kind of looking at the shapes I'm seeing, but I don't really care if it's perfect, because this is my expression and my version. I could just as easily change colors if I want to, but I'm pretty fond of these colors. I think it's looking good. And again, if something isn't thick enough or opaque enough, try a little white, try a second layer, some different strategies. Bring in some of the light blue that I'm seeing in here. You can kind of see it's like we're not like going in this perfect order of dark to light, but like kind of generally speaking, dark to light, or big areas to small areas. You know, it's like every painting's so different too. There's not one prescribed like recipe to follow. I find that each painting I do is a little bit different, but those are just some kind of general kind of discoveries and things I've found. And really at this time, it'd be good to start to bring in some of the blues that we're seeing kind of in the background with those flowers in the back. And if you look closely, it's like some of it's really just different kind of layers of paint sort of built up. So again, just look at the different tones and try to match what you see. This is where the, kind of painting by shape, painting by color, when you're looking at the image over top of these shadows. Some dark, some light, some in between. And I just kind of start tapping it on where I see it. I can kind of hop around. If you put just a little bit of water on your brush, it'll help you get a nice crisp edge as you're painting in some of these kind of smaller areas here. Remember that kind of outlined look. We'll complete that later. We're not to that part yet. Some of those little itty bitty lines that comes in after the fact. And I mean, there's still more, some little purples, some little yellows, some more colors to pull out here. But we get to kind of see it bit by bit. It's starting to come together. And I think, that's the part I really enjoy about this particular kit, is you really get to see this process of painting start to unfold. And kind of how paint needs to be layered and built up to create this image. It's not just done with a single brush stroke or even 2 or 3 or 4, but all these different brush strokes. This kind of purpley-ish color. I just put a little red in with my blue that already had some white in with it, so it kind of made this toned down purple. I also think this process is neat because I think it helps you learn how to see too all the different kind of shapes and shadows and layers as we're building up a painting. Kind of popping in a little bit of this background as well. I love the kind of act of putting in the background too around kind of your main image is always fun for me. Some more white and lighten this up. Just kind of these little strokes of blue. It's kind of like you can build them up in little sections. You can put them in as you see them. Bring a little yellow into that to kind of, some of it looks a little green kind of up here. I'll try to bring that color into it a little bit. And just kind of pop in these colors. There, I see them. Allowing the layering to just kind of naturally happen. Again, those kind of faint shadows in the background, kind of helpful for where I'm looking at placing some of this kind of green. Getting a little water on your brush can be helpful if you need a clean edge. So here. I mean, really, the process is kind of just to finish the painting is really, you know, kind of the same as kind of finishing, putting all the different colors where you see them. And then just, even though I'm not quite to the point of where I would actually start with fine details, I do just want to kind of, while we have a little bit of time together, mention some of those things. And then as you finish your paintings too, and work on some of the other ones, if you choose to, you'll have some different ideas. So I'm just gonna put a couple more little swipes of blue in here a minute, and then kind of talk about some other little kind of detailing. So this painting has a lot of little kind of fine lines and things, like around the leaves. We're seeing some kind of skinnier lines, kind of an outlined effect here, within here, up here. So typically for something like that, I would use like the smallest round brush, dipping it in a little bit of water to just make that point like nice and smooth. And then I dip my brush in a little bit of paint. Now, I think the key for the paint here is only putting it on the end of the brush, not loading it on the full brush, but just on the tip of the bristles. Then you'll be able to sort of get this kind of little light kind of line work look, which is what is happening a lot in this painting. And it's a lot of just kind of reloading your brush. And of course, I'm not actually ready for this point yet, but I just kind of want to show you why we're together of what, you know, what you could do with this. So, and it's just kind of this act of kind of outlining and bringing it line, and, you know, maybe you have to dip your brush in water periodically and then bring it back into the paint. You know, you might need to layer it. You might need to mix a little white to make it more opaque. Just a little bit of white in the blue with a nice, make sure again your brush is wet on the tip. And you can get all those little fine kind of lines. And so to finish mine up, I mean, really I probably am not adding any more colors into the mix. I'm probably sticking with what I've got here. And then I need to kind of keep bringing in colors into the flowers, into kind of the background, filling this up. Some of the smaller, brighter kind of pops of yellow that I'm seeing in here. And then kind of bringing some of that linear work. And then really, once I hit that point, I'll be about finished. So, I mean, I am going to finish mine up like on a video. Then that way you can kind of see what the process of mine and what it looks like. But I would just love to hear from you ladies a minute and just see kind of where you're at, what you think, your process. So I'm just gonna turn my camera back on a minute. I'm gonna turn me off spotlight. There we go. So what'd you ladies think? Oops, I think you're both on mute. Now we forget.
Yep. And then, I'm deaf all the time anyway. It's a different process of working, but if you see it feels sort of backwards somehow. But so here's where I'm at, just feeling like this is just blocked in.
Ooh, it's gorgeous.
Good.
Oops.
Here, I'm gonna hold it up or spotlight your video a minute. There we go. Oh yes, I love it.
Yeah, that's really neat.
But
You
the
do that
shapes
so fast.
The shapes are not defined enough, and I don't have enough contrast between lights and darks. So I'm feeling like this is very much preliminary blocking in.
And then it could be kind of good to go back over top and kind of define some things.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a base. It's not a painting yet.
Yes. Oh, it looks really beautiful.
Well, I'm way behind you guys.
That's okay though, Carol. Like your own pace is perfect. Oh, it's looking great.
Let's see.
Yes. So can you hold it back up for Susan? I don't know if she saw it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's looking awesome, Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah. This will take me a while.
And that's okay. You know what I found is that that's kind of the nice part about this process. It's like you can, spend some time on it, get up, go do other things, come back to it. It's really nice for that. I find it very relaxing in that sort of sense. And I definitely think it's, for me to finish an entire painting in an hour, like that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.